Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for taking the time to join us today. What I want to do today is give you an overview of ShipIndex.org and what it does, and then show you some ways that you can get a lot more from searching, different ways of searching in the database. And my brother, who helped build the database, says it's a database with a very narrow focus, but very broad application. And I think that's a great description of it. And in a way, it describes the way that you can search the database as well. It seems pretty simple. It seems pretty straightforward. Okay, it's a database of ships, but there's actually a whole lot more that you can do to it. And because the database has gotten so big, it's important to find ways to do more with it. So very briefly, what is ShipIndex.org? What does it do? And I should give you a little bit of background about myself, because that has a lot to do with it as well. During the day, I'm a librarian at an Ivy League university. That's where I spend a lot of my time. But right after I finished library school, I did a master's in maritime history at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. And I wanted to find ways of making it easier to do research on ships. My combination of the maritime interest and the research interest is what has led me to build this little company. And I know that a lot of people use ShipIndex.org for genealogy research, and that's fantastic. It does have, to me, it has a lot of other ways that it can be used as well. Certainly for historians and for folks who are doing research on, I don't know, vessels that may be found in there, in the area where they live. Or we had some folks in Washington State who were, I think, basically nautical archaeologists and historians working for the Washington State ferries, and they discover anchors. They're trying to figure out what vessels the anchors might have come from. And if they have a list of a couple of vessels, then they can do research on those vessels and then figure out if that might be the vessels that they're interested in or not. So ShipIndex.org, basically in a nutshell, it tells you what books or magazines or websites or databases or other resources mention the vessels that you're interested in learning more about. Originally, I called it a guide to books and ships, but it's gone beyond books because it's got a lot of websites and it's got a lot of magazines or journal content as well. The database covers any named vessel that is in a resource in English. So if you have a book about Soviet era warships that has an index, that I want to add that, that I have worked to add that content into my database. I always used to say that it went from the Solomenia, the Athenian ship of state during the age of Socrates, to the Costa Concordia and anything in between. And I guess now I should update my most recent well-known disaster ship from Costa Concordia to Dali. But it really does cover any ship that is in a resource that I have found. I say any vessel in a resource in English, but there are actually a couple of resources in Dutch as well, but we won't tell anybody about that. They're pretty easy to identify and transfer and translate. So that's what the database does. It tells you which books or whatever resources mention the vessels you want to know more about. So you do need to know the name of the ship when you're starting your research. But there's a bunch more to it from that. And, that's not always the case. Mostly the case, as with most things. It's mostly true, but not completely true. There are really two ways of using this database. There's a free database and there's a subscription database. I mentioned that I started, that I had have a master's in library science and a master's in maritime history. And I started this while I was working at the University of Washington back in 2000 to 2002. And I created a free database that had about 160,000 citations in it. And then my brothers and I started a company in the library industry, and we went down there for a while. And it was a while later before I shifted back to this project, because this is what really This really excites me. I want to make maritime history research easier to do, and this is what I think is a big way of making that work. So my brother and I turned this into an actual business. Now, of course, the ShipIndex.com had been taken by then because I never really thought about taking making it a business. So it has always remained ShipIndex.org. But in any case, anything that has been added since anything that's been added since we turned it into a company a number of years ago, almost anything, not completely anything, but almost anything has gone into the subscription database. So as you can see on the homepage, we put as much information as we can out there. We want to make sure you know what the database can do for you, and you get a real sense of it before you subscribe. There's over 150,000 citations in the free database, and there's over 3.6, well, there's currently 3.64 million citations from almost 1,200 different resources in the subscription database. So there's not a lot of difference between the two. It's just a lot more content in the subscription database. A lot of classic resources like Fairbairn's Merchant Sales, Starbucks, History of the American Whale Fishery, and a bunch of other resources. The ones that I found first, those are in the database for free, as are subject entries from WorldCat, which I can talk a little bit more about if we'd like to in a little bit. But anything beyond that, all the other titles I've added through the years, and many different online resources are all in the subscription database. Right now, you can see I'm looking at the website itself. See, it says log in. So I'm not currently logged in. So I'm going to try a search here for Rappahannock. I'm going to see what we find. Okay, so we find a couple of things. A lot of these are in the subscription database. I mean, it's got 150, 160,000, while the free database has 150 to 160,000. Subscription database has got like 200 times that or something like that. So we do have a link here to WorldCat, which can help you find information by or about ships. This can be a challenge at times, but it is something that can work. They've made a lot of changes with WorldCat, so they're a little bit harder to use these days. I'm going to log in now. And let's see. And then I'm going to give it a try again. And now you can see we're now logged in. We found 10 citations from 7 different resources. And this is what you will find. You don't find, actually, a lot of resources will link to full text when we can, but very often also they won't. So it's important to know that. It's important to keep that in mind. So what you learn here is that a vessel named Rappahannock is mentioned in Ralph Snow's Bath Iron Works, The First 100 Years, published by Maine Maritime Museum. I was actually working at Maine Maritime Museum when I identified the challenges of looking for information about specific ships, because if we wanted to learn something about the Sewell ships of steel, these not particularly famous vessels, but vessels about which stuff has been written, you had to go book by book in the library to see what you could find. And that library, actually, the collection was closed, so visitors couldn't really do that. And I thought, there's got to be a better way of making this work. And so this is the end result. Page 16 of Snow's Bath Iron Works mentions Rappahannock. In Ira Glazer's and Michael Tepper's Famine Immigrants, there's a vessel named Rappahannock in volume 1 at DM, and these mean different things. Basically, we're taking whatever information is available from the resource itself. So in these titles, there's no additional information about Rappahannock. If you look at this one from the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database online, there was a vessel named Rappahannock, Captain Clark, 220 tons, 8 guns, and this one is a hot link, so we can follow a link to that and see where it takes us. And this takes us to a specific voyage of this particular Rappahannock with information that has been collected in slavevoyages.org. This directory, this incredible collection of resources that's trying to track the movement of enslaved people throughout across the Atlantic, transatlantic specifically. Here's another entry from the Great Lakes Vessel Online. This one, it says it has an illustration. Let's see if that's true. I didn't check, so we'll see. Okay, it looks like in this case I have to research. I have to search again. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it happens because the format has been redone or because you just can't set that up in advance. But I just repeated the search, and here we find an image of Rappahannock and information about this particular vessel, 308 tons. And I think we'd seen some of that information. Well, we found a propeller 1895 with its official number. And then here's a couple of other Rappahannocks in Mystic Seaport's ship register database. And it takes us directly to that page. It's a little bit tough to see here. Let's see if I can go in a little bit. Rappahannock, Captain Russell, and there's various information here. In this particular case, so this is a great example of all the different kinds of things that you find in the database. This was an annual directory, this one from 1865. Okay, and it just says, it's like a phone book for ships, basically. That entry we saw about the transit from the transatlantic slave trade was talking about a specific voyage of that particular vessel. Great Lakes Vessels Index, online index, was looking at a particular vessel with some information about it and its history. And other entries, such as this entry from Bunting's Sea Struck, mentions Rappahannock, that is a ship, and is mentioned on page 226. Now, we don't know a whole lot about what it says on that page, but we know that it may be worth finding and tracking down. And that's the most important thing to me. Like, learning that this citation exists, that this mention exists, is so incredibly valuable, and I think makes a big difference in making it possible for people to search for information. But we can see right now that we've got a couple different things. Now, in this case, so since this book is about, it's a maritime history of sorts, we can guess, I would guess that when they say ship, they specifically mean a square rig vessel with 3 or more masts, where all 3 masts have got square rigs on them, including the third mast. If the third mast didn't have a main square rig, it would be called a bark. So they mean a ship in the sort of the definition, the maritime definition, rather than something that's bigger than a boat. So that's probably different from this one, which says it's a schooner, which has got 4.5 masts, of at least 2 4.5 masts. And see, we see something here that's a propeller. This one, from the transatlantic slave trade database, is obviously a bit earlier. So we see, what my point is, that we see multiple vessels with the same name. And that can be a real challenge. And if you really want to see it, the worst is almost certainly Mary. You do a search for Mary and you find over 5,000 citations for ships with that name, which, yeah, that's pretty overwhelming. But we do have this thing that we have done. It takes a lot of work, but when we can, we connect specific citations for ships with a record that we have created for a particular ship. And my favorite for this is certainly the Monongahela. I love showing off the Monongahela, and so the friends in the Pacific Northwest, born and raised in Seattle, will particularly appreciate this. But in just a moment, I'll get to that. You can see here, we're looking at 3 different vessels. All of them, not only were they all called the Monongahela, but they were all called USS Monongahela. They were 3 separate naval vessels. And not to get too technical about it, but we're using Wikidata identifiers here so that to bring these different citations together. We're trying to really be open, use some of the resources of the open web. So if you're doing something and that you've got a Wikidata identifier for a particular ship, you know what this URL will look like at ShipIndex if we've got entries about it. It'll be ShipIndex.org/vessels/the Q identifier. But if you're not familiar with the Q identifier, you're not familiar with Wikidata, that's absolutely fine. It's no problem at all. I just want to be clear that we're talking about a specific hull, basically. This specific ship named the Monongahela, this replenishment oiler, which had the pennant number AO-178 when it was in the United States Navy, entered in 1981. It may still be in there. So here's a book by Paul Silverstone called The Navy of the Nuclear Age, 1947 to 2007, and it mentions the Monongahela on page 216. So now you know, oh, well, let's go track down Silverstone's book and see what we can find. And I want to highlight here something that we've done here. Because we've done, whenever we can do this, we make corrections to the information that is being imported into the database. This was an entry from WorldCat that spelled out Monongahela, and we could see immediately that that was incorrect. So we've fixed it so that it shares the right name, but we also kept the old one just in case I was totally wrong about it, and it really was the Monongahela, and we want to go back and fix that, or you know more than I do, and you can find it under that name as well. But of course, my favorite Monongahela is this one. Oh, actually, the Monongahela is not the USA one, but I'm going to show you some other information. We have a bunch of different citations from American Neptune. American Neptune was the primary journal of American maritime history published by the Peabody Essex Museum. And so you can see that in volume 20, page 141, there's an entry about this vessel. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Monongahela that I particularly am a fan of is this one. You'll see mentions in the Sea Chest, the Journal of the Puget Sound Maritime Historical Society. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to limit it to those with images. So apparently this article in the U.S. Naval Institute Proceedings has an illustration. And this is obviously a U.S. naval vessel, but I didn't know which one. So that's why we didn't connect it with one of these specific hulls up here. This was another one. This was Monongahela. And this image, which comes from the University of Washington, well, actually comes from the Puget Sound Maritime Historical Society. It was hosted by way of University of Washington. It's this fantastic ship, a picture of the vessel being pulled out of Lake Union as the Aurora Bridge is nearing completion. It would have gotten stuck on the inside of it, never would have been able to get out without, cutting down the masts a bunch. So I just always love this. As I said, I was born and raised in Seattle, and that's one that I particularly like to highlight. So we can also use other names. We can add other names when the vessel has changed its name several times, once or more times. We can put those under the specific name that we have here as well. Okay, so how might you use this yourselves? A couple of different ways you could do it. If a library near you is subscribing, you don't need to subscribe. You can go to that library, or you can access it through that library, and you have access to the complete collection, all 3.6 million citations. But you might want to create an account. Now, I've already logged in, so I actually can't create my account now because I am logged in. You could create an account without paying. You don't need to pay anything to do that. But then you can be notified when new content is added to the database for the ships that matter for you. For this account, let's see, I believe that I'm only tracking one ship here, and that's Hornet. Obviously I have a couple of different accounts, and some of them are tracking a lot more ships, but I receive an email whenever content is added to Hornet. And you have to create an account, of course, because we need to be able to know where to contact you. But otherwise, the free resources, you can access those without creating an account. One thing that I think is pretty useful for folks is to subscribe for a certain amount of time, do the research that matters to you, start tracking those vessels that matter to you, and then if you want, you can let the subscription end, but you will still be notified when new content is added. If you have a subscription currently, when that content is added, you will receive the citations in your email. If you don't have a current subscription, it'll just be a notification that more content has been added in those places. And I should mention that the company's been in business for longer than I care to admit, and we have not raised our prices in the last 14 years. Okay, there, I admitted it. In the last 14 years, we've not raised our prices. We are going to need to do that at the end of June. So from the homepage, there's a blog post about that. So you can see that these prices are gonna be going up in a little bit. So if you start a monthly recurring subscription now, that price will never go up. It's just whatever price you signed up at. You can also purchase a gift certificate that you don't need to use now. It's a year of access from the time that you start it. What's the word? I don't know, authorize it. But not from the time that you purchase it. So you could purchase that now and save it for the point when you want to do research. Or you could pass it on to a friend as well. So I just want to mention that we are going to have those prices going up a little bit. Still, I believe that the value in knowing that these particular vessels are mentioned places is incredibly helpful. And there are so many ways that people who are doing genealogical research can use the website for this sort of stuff. You may be interested in the vessels that your ancestors emigrated on. You want to find a picture of that vessel, and that's certainly understandable. That can be, especially if it was an 18th or 19th century ship, that's going to be particularly difficult. But sometimes it can be done. But the areas where I think is particularly interesting is if you have a service history for an ancestor who served in the Navy, in the American Navy, let's say, or sailed on a particular ship in the Merchant Marines or something, you can do research on that vessel. You know when they were on board that vessel. And so then you can learn what happened to them. If you have an opportunity to do research on, someone was on one of those Monongahela's, say, and you can do research on it. You can say, I know my ancestor was on board from this date to this date. Then you find a history of that vessel, and you find out what happened at the time. You know that your ancestor, that's what happened to your ancestor. And if you look in, if you find something in WorldCat, you could find a logbook or a journal from the voyage that your ancestor emigrated on. I mean, that would be pretty incredible if you did, but it certainly is possible because more and more libraries are cataloging and sometimes even digitizing these logbooks. And I mean, maybe they don't mention your ancestor anywhere in the logbook. Though what if they do? But even if they don't, you get a sense of what that voyage was like, and you can learn more about what happened to those ancestors and what they did. There's so many other ways you can use this too. I love the phrase of just adding leaves to the tree. Maybe you just want to add a picture of the cruise ship that your grandparents took their honeymoon on. That's a great little picture to add to the story that you're putting together, and we can help you find those images quickly and easily. So and we have a growing number of libraries that offer this to folks either for on-campus and institutional library, academic libraries, and public libraries. You can either access it, from the library or from home as well. We're not like Ancestry. We'll let you access it from home. So these are things that you can certainly do. And if your library does not currently offer access to ShipIndex, you can see if they'll set up a trial, and then you would have access to it if they allow patrons to use that. So anyway, that's a brief start on this. And now I want to show you how to use ShipIndex a bit in some much more advanced ways, because there's so much that is hiding in here, I think. So here I've done a search for Elwell. Okay, and what have I found? Well, I have found vessels named Elwell. I don't have any of these citations brought together to describe a specific hull, but that's just the way. I mean, that work of adding those Wikidata things, all has to be done by hand. Takes a long time, and so we've done a lot of the important content in there, but there's always more that we can add. So this is what we found here, but there's actually a whole lot more here than here's for the folks in the Northwest. John McFarlane manages this great thing called the Nauticopedia that's got all kinds of information about, he's up in Canada, but covers information about vessels in the Pacific Northwest. He's been collecting lots of information there. And our goal always is to say, hey, this mentions, we're not pulling that information from him. We're saying, if you're interested in the 1975 LWEL that was built in Damariscotta, Maine, check out what John has got here in this. So this is Charleston, USS, but this must have been another name for this vessel. It doesn't look like it. I'm going to have to take a closer look at that. I'm not sure quite what something might have happened, and we always need to keep an eye on things that might have changed on some of these web pages, or mistakes can happen. You can always click on report an error just to send a little bit of information, say, hey, check this citation because I'm not sure this is connecting to the right resource. So that's another feature that we offer here. But what I fear a lot of people often don't realize is there's a whole lot of other ships out there. We were just looking at ones that are named only LWEL. And look, we find a lot of other here. CF LWEL, Clara LWEL, Clara W LWEL, Edward LWEL, James LWEL, etc. So there's a lot of other vessels. If you make sure that you click on that see other matching ships link, you'll find a lot more content in the database whenever it appears. Now, some of you are like, okay, but John Compton, I don't see LWEL there. What's going on there? And it's a good question. We should take a look. I'll do a search, find LWEL here, and here it is. John Compton, schooner, Captain LWEL. So it's not named the LWEL. So what can we do there? Well, there is something we can do. There's some pretty goofy, let me just type this, some goofy advanced searching in the database, and I think we need to do a better job of that. But we do have the ability with that @ ship _ name and then the name to limit your search only to the vessels that have LWEL somewhere in their name. This is a really useful tool to use to narrow things down. And the help button here will show you all of the different things that you can do. There's some very advanced searching that you can do here. A lot of it I don't ever do as advanced as you could do, like, either Mary or Elizabeth and Queen, for example, or Mary or Elizabeth, but not Jane. So there's a lot of different searching that you can do here. And I want to show you a couple of other ways that this can be particularly useful. If I search for Castle, and then I say, well, okay, so I found 54 ships here, including one that was a USS Castle. I'm going to click on see other matching ships, and let's see what I can find. And you can see it goes up to 10. There's a ton in here, and a lot of them don't have Castle in here, but mostly Castle appears as the second word. So how am I gonna find just the ones that end in Castle? And the answer is if I do Castle $. Again, this is noted on the help page here. If I do Castle $, it shows me all of the entries where the name of the ship ends in the word Castle. And if I do, I'm not quite sure if I'll come up with anything different, but if I just do oh, okay. I know why that happened. I didn't try that one out. It was just looking for the full word ASTLE. So if I do star, which as I imagine you all have done a fair bit of researching, you're familiar with using a star for truncation or for being representing any characters. If I do that, I come back with these, and but I didn't limit it to only the ship names. That's why I got Aspergillus. So if I do at ship _ name star ASTLE $. Now I found this in here. I find Arawana, Newcastle, which I had not found before because when I did castle, it was only looking for that one word. So these are a couple of different ways that you can do some more advanced searching. And we can do things like Mary, which will bring back every vessel that starts with the word Mary in it. Or Elizabeth, with the $, we find everyone that ends with that. Or I could do at ship name star Beth $. And I find Elizabeth without a Z, but with an S. So the wonderful thing about online databases is you can try all different kinds of things, all sorts of ways of searching. And if you mess it up, nobody else knows. It doesn't matter. There's no harm. There's no cost in doing that. You just explore and you try it and you find different things. And for example, here, so here's Christine Elizabeth with an S and Christine Elizabeth with a Z. Now, it is very possible that these two ships, okay, 1881, 1882, are the same ship. And they must be. Okay, we have a couple. I don't know if this is the same ship over time. I can do that research and find it out, but there are so many citations from this that it can take a long time. But I would guess that these are probably the same vessel. And we only found some, and I want to be clear. I mean, this one, Christine Elizabeth, it was spelled, Alisa, Beth here. We didn't make a mistake. When this was transcribed, they transcribed it correctly. They may have written it down incorrectly when they were in the port or something like that, compiling this 1882 directory, or this is a different vessel from the Christine Elizabeth that we were looking at before. All kinds of different possibilities. This one does say Captain Aska, who we saw in the other one as well, though. So these are a couple of the different ways. Let's see, I want to jump back to some more ways that you can, some more advanced searching that you can do, and then I'll stop and see if we've got any questions that I can address. So here we're doing NO. We're saying, I want to find ships where the name of the ship starts with NO and then anything, and ends with the word castle. And so I find Nord American Sterling Castle, Nottingham Castle. If I do that again with NO star and then star castle $, I might find other results. I did see a little bit more there. Noble Anne. So sometimes it is searching the citations, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I can also do, let's see. So I can star NGO star castle $. So we find, for example, Raglan Castle. It definitely doesn't follow the NGO there. So if I add ship name and then do the same NGO star and castle $. So now I am limiting it only to the ship names and not to the citations. Then I just find 2 results there. I'm going to pause here and see if there are questions that folks have that might be helpful for me to address for everybody right now. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, there are 2. Do you include ferries, tugboats, submarines? That is the first. And can you identify ships by locations such as ports or shipyards? So those are the 2.
Yeah. So first, absolutely. I include ferries. I include any type of vessel that I can find that's in a vessel in a resource in English. So this includes so let's see. Resources here shows all of the resources that are in the database. There's 100 per page. Tyne Tugs and Tug Builders, a history of Tyne tugs, their builders and owners. Now, obviously, that's English, not American, but that website, the contents are in the database. And then And of course, now we're getting ones with authors. But you can do a quick search in this area too. And I'm trying to think of the current, not sure why the name is falling out of my head right now, but the guide to American vessels, basically, any modern ship that's afloat right now that has a record in the American Merchant Directory, which is, I think, anything over 16 feet or something like that, should be in here, and that would absolutely include resources like tugboats and ferry boats and other vessels that are registered in the United States. So we do have a lot of resources in there. For folks who are doing genealogical research, I'd like to point out these resources here. The naval documents of the American Revolution. There are other collections, the naval documents from the War of 1812, and other things which have been written and compiled by the Department of the Navy. There are similar histories of the world wars and others. And so what we did for ShipIndex is that we took the vessels that are mentioned in these indexes and put them into the database. But there are so many people who are mentioned in these indexes, and this is a 12-volume set. And similar for other resources as well. If you have an ancestor who you believe, especially if you think that they were involved with the naval side of things in the American Revolution or the other wars for which the Navy History Office has collected information, they can be fantastic resources. And because they are published by the US government and are not covered by copyright, you will find them accessible in HathiTrust and other resources online. So that's a resource that I think people don't always uncover. I think it's really, really valuable. Let's see, what other questions? What was our next one?
The next one was, can you identify ships by location such as ports or shipyards? And then we've got a couple more that are coming in.
And I think the others are similar, right? The questions about shipbuilders and shipyards.
Yeah.
The short answer is that we can't usually do that. And I'll provide some examples of why now. Constitution is probably not a good one to choose because we're going to find so many entries for it. But just on absolutely every nuclear U.S. nuclear sub is going to be in the database because we've got collections from the Dictionary of American Naval Fighting Ships, so they will definitely be in here. I want to clarify the difference between these entries here. The entries that you see up here, these four are specific hulls, a specific vessel. USS Constitution is currently in Boston Navy Yard, and this SS Constitution, an ocean liner built in 1951, and this Constitution, which is a brig, which was listed in this is from the Mystic Seaport records, I believe. Okay, so this is what we know about these ships. What do we know about these ships? Well, this one we know actually quite a lot. This is a small amount of information that appears here. If I follow the link to Wikidata, I can see all of the information that is recorded in Wikidata about it. Just briefly, you know about Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. The primary Wikipedia site is in English, but there are Wikipedia entries in many other languages. There are many other Wikipedias in many other languages, and they are not just translations of the English language Wikipedia. This is a list, 34 entries. 34 different languages have got entries about the USS Constitution, the specific vessel that's in Boston. So here's the entry about USS. No, it automatically translated for me. I apologize. for that. Here's this is from fr.wikipedia.org. Okay, so and each of these are different. They tell different stories. They talk about the same thing, but they tell different stories. And what is really useful to bring all of these together is a database of information. So you don't have a discussion here. You've got specific things. It is a museum ship. It is a warship. There's various other bits of information here, and it will include, of course, the builder, whose name escapes me at the moment. Well, it's designed by Hart, but so I was thinking this is an interesting database that could be used in some cases to find the information that you're looking for. I might be getting a little bit too far in the weeds here, so I apologize. I did want to highlight, though, that when you look at this ocean liner, for example, on Wikidata, you see a lot less information about it. What you do always have it's just data, it's just specifics. And then all of these ones down here, the only information we know is what we have pulled from the indexes. So if an index included the shipyard in their description of the vessel, and all of these, none of these name no information at all, then it would be included in here. But for none of these don't have 1816 from Cranberry Isles, Maine. Let me just jump ahead a couple of pages because obviously there's a lot of pages. When I get here we'll find more specific info. So I could connect this. US and Guerriere, obviously we're talking about this one here. So what I'm going to do real quick, here it is. I'm going to copy that Q identifier. I'm going to send myself a note about this one, report an error. I can connect this to, let's see if it'll let me just it's not letting me submit the issue. I don't know quite why that is. Okay, sorry about that. I'll have to investigate that. The point that I'm trying to make is we don't know, on a broader level, we don't know which vessel we're talking about. Here it's pretty safe to guess. Obviously, there's a lot here that I could connect. Most of these are the USS Constitution. Looking for somewhere I don't know. Here's a Constitution of Barkentine, okay? We don't know which vessel that is, and so we don't have any information about it. The Wikidata site could have some information if somebody had connected it, but the broader point is there is no way through ShipIndex to search for individual shipyards, generally speaking, because that information was never provided to us. Similarly, there's not information about ports because this is a mention on page 540 of this Constitution, this brig from Cutler's Queens of the Western Ocean. Well, it doesn't say anything about what port it was in at that particular time or what's being described. Maybe it has no reference at all to that on the page. We just haven't collected that information. So I'm afraid that's not a great answer, but that is a specific answer about why we're not finding that information and don't have that information in the database.
There's one about, would you please quickly run through the possibilities for searching through for passenger names, like if you were searching for a specific passenger?
So the best way to search for passengers' names, in my opinion, is to go with the big genealogy databases with Ancestry, Find My Past, My Heritage, Family Search, etc. My focus here is really on maritime history and making maritime history research easier to do. This entire company, you're looking at basically all of it. I am the company. Heather helps me in incredible ways with marketing. Sean helps me with tech stuff. There are a couple of other people that help with things, but otherwise this is it. And there's no way, obviously, that we could compete with all the resources of those great big fully funded companies, and they're already doing that, right? They've got so many resources that have been digitized and put into their resources. So those are absolutely the best places to go for finding out information about individuals. When you do find out what information about the vessel that they were on, you absolutely can come to ShipIndex and try to learn more about that vessel and maybe discover an entry or find a directory, a guide, a logbook or something like that, possibly for a particular vessel that through WorldCat, things like that.
I think those are all the questions right now that are here.
Okay, now I'm going to jump back a little bit and contradict everything I said just now. Basically, I mean, you can't search for passengers, so you're not going to find passengers in here. Sometimes people are searching for captains, and sometimes they can successfully find those captains. Those sometimes are basically when you're looking for an Anglo-American ship in the mid to late 19th century. But if you're looking for Captain Ully, say, then it brings up Charles F. Elwell, okay? And if we look through, we see here, oh, Charles F. Elwell, we had been looking at Elwell before. Bark Captain A.K. Ully, noted in the directory of 1873. So let's see what we were looking for Elwell, and it, see if it does look like Ully, but in other resources, it looked like Utley. And it's tough to say, here it's pretty clearly Utley. These were all transcribed by humans, but then the information was collected by humans as well. So there's a lot of opportunities for errors to get introduced here. And if you did want to search for Utley, well, you find a couple of different things, and we'd seen that Elwell one, so we could follow that up. And let's take a look at Lady Lisgar. I have no idea what we would find here, but oh, there's Captain Utley again. That's kind of useful. But then in other cases, if you go to Aurora, here's 8, 9 different vessels with the name Aurora. This one says Clorind, but at one point it had the name Aurora, so that's why it's listed here. It had a couple of different names, and we were able to bring them together. Okay, but and then we find another 2,228 citations that are not connected with any of those. And what you would literally need to do is go through all 23 pages plus all of these up here and search for Utley. Oh my gosh, we found it on the first. No, we didn't. Okay, I thought for a second it was pretty incredible if we found it on the first page. We don't find it here. So you would have to do a lot of searching. It's not an easy way to do it. It's not, it is not ideal. It's not what the database was meant for, but sometimes people can do something. So, yeah.
There's a question that just came in too, Peter, that says, I understand the resources are English only. Have you some ships that began as American, but then became of another nationality with a new name, such as the Baltimore privateers in South America in the 1820s?
So the English is only that the resources that I am including are in English. If it is a book in English about Chinese merchant vessels of the 1920s, I definitely want to include it, especially when it's an area that I don't have as many entries about. So, and there's let's see, there's here's one great, let's see if I can find this. Hands Across the Sea. Okay, Norway Heritage. I thought that was going to give me a link to the resource itself. That is this is a resource, norwayheritage.com. Okay, I guess, I'm sorry, this is in English, but it is looking at Norwegian vessels. But I guess that was my point. We really are looking at, we're just interested in the language that we're working in, because I have no idea what the second language I would attack would be. I mean, is it French? Is it German? Is it an Asian language? Is it Dutch? I mean, how much, it's a huge amount of maritime history that's related to Dutch research, so to Dutch history. So of course that would be a great option too. Portuguese, for example, and Spanish. And I can't, I seriously can't choose what the second language would be. So I'm avoiding it to the best of my extent. But it is super important to note that there will be lots of resources that talk about non-American vessels, but only in English. So Baltimore privateers in South America, there's a book, Baltimore, I guess it's this Bill Dudley's Maritime Maryland. Yes, that's the book. So, and you can see I have a little bit of information here. Page numbers in italics indicate the illustrations and tables, so we can use that to indicate our entries that a particular page has an illustration, for example. And then I can, if you want, you can click and find in a library to find out what libraries near you have got this particular book, Maritime Maryland. I don't know if Maritime Maryland would have something relevant or useful to the question about Baltimore privateers that ended up in South America. But it's possible. Bill Dudley is a very highly regarded historian who wrote that. Well, he wrote it 14 years ago, I guess. But I remember, well, that's annoying. My frustration with WorldCat continues to grow. I'll have to take a look. I must have had the wrong OCLC number, or else WorldCat just isn't working properly right now. If you're not familiar with WorldCat, of course, it's a collection of the holdings in libraries around the world, primarily in the US, and where it's beneficial is it can tell you, when it's working, it can tell you what library near you has got a copy of Maritime Maryland. They made a lot of changes over the last couple of years that have frustrated me greatly. You used to be able to find information about specific vessels as well through their subject headings, and those things have changed. But the fact that they're not working at all at the moment seems to be a greater issue. And it's the only resource we have. So we put up with all the frustrating changes that they've introduced there. Are there other questions that folks have, or thoughts? And maybe if it would work, folks can unmute themselves and share any thoughts. Also, I'm always curious about what people. I'm more curious about what people don't like about the database than what they do like about the database. But I'm certainly happy to hear positive comments as well.
There was a question, can you search for a ship by Wikidata queue number?
If you have a queue number, it is always going to be in the same format, ShipIndex.org, it's like vessels, and then the queue number. So how can I try searching for schooner and see if it will? Sometimes I have a tough time Kazbek. That's not we're gonna try. So this is a naval ships of Russia. Wow, I'm gonna guess that we're not gonna find this here, but if we did, it would be at that queue number. Yeah. So you can always search for queue number using that format. If I go to something that I know will be in here, well, let's just go Monongahela. We'll have to choose the correct Monongahela. This USS Monongahela. And I put that queue number in there, then it will bring back to the page we saw before. Okay, I didn't know which Monongahela I was looking at there, but we have about 10 or 11,000 vessel identifiers that have been added to the database so far. As I said, they have to be done citation by citation. So they take a long time. Well, I'm happy to take any other comments or questions, but if there are none, trying to think of something else to share. I guess the highlight, the things I would point out are that let's see, I'll log out here for a second here. I've logged out. I don't have access now. So if I search for Monongahela, I can see all the things that are in here. Then I can click on subscribe to view. To do that, you have to create an account because, you know, we need to be able to keep track of that stuff. And then you can, you know, pay with a credit card. It's $8 a month right now. Go up a little bit at the end of June. And then you can have a set amount of time as well. And these prices will go up in June, but you can subscribe now. And of course, there won't be any impact to you if you, you know, subscribe for 6 months right now. You won't see any changes, of course. Thank you all. If you are in a particular, if you know of a group where that you would love to hear about ShipIndex, I'd be happy to talk with your group, whether it's a historical society. I've done a couple of talks with genealogists about ways to do genealogy research when it comes to vessels, or maritime societies. That's always, of course, that's great. If you have a maritime museum near you that's a member of the Council of American Maritime Museums, they actually should have access to the database for free. They may be difficult for them to have enabled it for everybody on the site, but or on the grounds, but they may be available there as well. I hope that you'll take an opportunity to try out the database. And if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reply to a note we've sent or send us an email at comments@shipindex.org. Thanks a lot for your time. I very much appreciate the last hour that you spent with us. You took the time to spend that with us. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody, or morning.
And it was very helpful. Thanks.
Excellent. All right. All right. Bye.